it's an amazing thing that every single Jew seems to know, no matter how ignorant they might be of Shabbat and Kashrut and anything else, but everybody seems to know that if you have a tattoo, you cannot be buried in a Jewish cemetery. I hear this from Jews who don't know anything else, but they know that. So I have to add that it's hard to know where that comes from. Because again, as you said, that is a myth. It is true that tattooing is a sin, and I'll explain why it's a sin. But listen, there are many things that are sins. Eating non-kosher food, not keeping the Shabbos, these are sins. And yet, we certainly allow the person to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. As a general rule, sinful conduct is regrettable, but usually it does not stop a person from being buried in a Jewish cemetery, and tattoos are no different than any other sin, and we would certainly allow the person to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Nevertheless, it is very, very true that the Torah prohibits things like tattooing, it prohibits body mutilation, it prohibits many types of body piercings. Pierced ears are a little different because that's soft cartilage tissue that would close up, so halachically actually that is permitted, but other types of body piercings may raise serious questions. Maimonides writes, as a rational reason, which may not be the final word, that body piercings and tattooing were commonly associated with idolatrous rituals in the pagan world, and since God wants to distance ourselves from participation in pagan rituals, he told us not to engage in these practices. This is what Maimonides says in the Guide to the Perplexed. Again, those reasons are a little bit weak, because even if that was the case 3,000 years ago, it's not necessarily the case today. Most people who tattoo are not doing it as part of idolatrous or pagan rituals, so why would it be forbidden? I mean, after all, I had mentioned yoga as something that may have started off as idolatrous, and now it becomes permitted. So if all you're going to have is Maimonides' problem of idolatry, then you could deal with tattoos the same way you deal with yoga, and yet we don't. So the fundamental reason seems to be not so much that it's connected to idolatry, but the notion that a Jew has to understand that their body is not their property. Their body is God's property that is given to us as a loan for the duration of our lives. Again, the Alter Rebbe talks about this. He says, our body does not belong to us. Our body is, in his words, Kinyono Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the property of God. In fact, that is why we are actually commanded to preserve our health. And again, many of us, including myself, are not as conscientious as we should be, and that's something that we should be conscientious. Things like diet and exercise are part of that mitzvah as well, because keep in mind that although the essence of a person is their soul and not their body, the soul cannot do its job unless it's in a body which can do mitzvot and everything else. So part of the laws against tattooing is the recognition that the body does not belong to us, and therefore we cannot do with it whatever we want. Even plastic surgery. Now, if one is a burn victim and one is doing plastic surgery to prevent, to cover up disfigurement, that's perfectly legitimate. But if one is simply doing vanity plastic surgery, again, I'm not giving a halachic ruling, one should talk to their rabbi, but there's at least a question whether you're allowed to surgically change parts of the body if there's not a compelling reason to do so, because it's simply not your property. Your body belongs to God, and that is where the laws against tattooing come from.
Moment of Wisdom. Sub-brief and life-changing moments. Join us. Subscribe to Moment of Wisdom channels on YouTube, Telegram, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.